All right, let's read another edition of the Rambler by Dr. Samuel Johnson. This is number 29 for Tuesday, June 26th, 1750. The title of which is The Folly of Anticipating Misfortune. Some Latin here, and then we'll go on to the quote. But God has wisely hid from human sight the dark decrees of future fate, and sown their seeds in depth of night. He laughs at all the giddy turn of state, when mortals search too soon, in fear too late. Dryden. There is nothing recommended with greater frequency among the gayer poets of antiquity than the secure possession of the present hour, and the dismission of all the cares which intrude upon our quiet or hinder by importunate perturbations the enjoyment of those delights which our condition happens to set before us. Stop for a second. There's nothing recommended with greater frequency among the gayer poets of antiquity than the secure possession of the present hour. So the ancients would recommend enjoying the moment of now and dismissing all the cares which intrude upon our quiet, anything that might come in and bother us, by importunate perturbations. That's a couple of words. The enjoy or hinder by importunate perturbations the enjoyment of those delights which our condition happens to set before us. So yeah, okay, so don't let the cares and worries about the future intrude upon our present felicity. The ancient poets are, indeed, by no means unexceptionable teachers of morality. The ancient poets are, indeed, by no means unexceptional teachers of morality. Their precepts are to be always considered as the sallies of a genius, intent rather upon giving pleasure than instruction, eager to take every advantage of insinuation, and provided the passions can be engaged on its side, very little solicitous about the suffrage of reason. What? Wow. Whoa. The ancient poets are indeed by no means unexceptional teachers. It's kind of an interesting thing. So they are by no means unexceptional teachers. So they are exceptional teachers of morality. So they're exceptional teachers of morality. Their precepts are to be always considered as the sallies of genius. So what they say should be considered as genius, intent rather upon giving pleasure than instruction. So looking to give instruction rather than pleasure. I got that. Eager to take every advantage of insinuation, taking every chance to get into us. Eager to take every advantage of insinuation, and provided the passions can be engaged on its side, very little solicitous about the suffrage of reason. So usually in accord, I think, then with reason, if they can get in. Okay, so the ancients had a lot of wisdom that they wanted to impart on us for our well-being rather than our pleasure, and that it would be good for us to take that in wherever possible. The darkness and uncertainty through which the heathens were compelled to wander in the pursuit of happiness may indeed be alleged as an excuse for many of their seducing invitations to immediate enjoyment, which the moderns by whom they have been imitated have not to plead. Darkness and uncertainty through which the heathens were compelled to wander in the pursuit of happiness. The heathens had to go through, they didn't know the way. It may indeed be alleged as an excuse for many of their seducing invitations to immediate enjoyment, which the moderns by whom they have been imitated have not to plead. Don't quite know if I get that. So to be like the heathens, like the barbarous tribes of Northern Europe, the Germans maybe at the time. The darkness and uncertainty through which the heathens were compelled to wander, because they didn't have teachers like that. Wander in the pursuit of happiness may indeed be alleged as an excuse for many of their seducing invitations. It's an excuse for their invitations because of the wonder. I don't know if I get that. That's only half of the paragraph. It is no wonder that such as had no promise of another state should eagerly turn their thoughts upon the improvement of that which was before them. Turn their thoughts upon the improvement of that which was before them. But surely those who are acquainted, such as had no problem, but surely those who are acquainted with the hopes and fears of eternity might think it necessary to put some restraint upon their imagination. I get it. The heathens, it's the religious element, right? They didn't have Christ. So I think what Dr. Johnson's point was. And so they had no reason to turn to other than the immediacy of the moment. Whereas the Christian, again, Dr. Johnson's perspective, the non-heathen would have eternity to think about. And so they should eagerly turn their thoughts upon the improvement of that which was before them. But surely it is no wonder that such had no promise of another state, such that it is no wonder, the heathen, it is no wonder that such as had no promise of another state should eagerly turn their thoughts upon the improvement of that which was before them. Yes, the heathen's lot. But surely those who are acquainted with the hopes and fears of eternity might think it necessary to put some restraint upon their imaginations and reflect that by echoing the songs of the ancient Bacharanals, not sure what that word means, and transmitting the maxims of past debauchery, they not only prove that they want invention, but virtue. Not only prove that they want invention, but virtue, and submit to the servility of imitation, only to copy that of which the writer, if he was to live now, would often be ashamed. I think I get it. So you're talking about those who are not heathens, who Christians have a reason to think about the higher state, right? Something other than the immediate present enjoyments. Yet as the errors and follies of a great genius are seldom without some radiations of understanding by which meaner minds may be enlightened, the incitements to pleasure are, in those authors, generally mingled with such reflections upon life as well deserve to be considered distinctly from the purposes for which they are produced, and to be treasured up as the settled conclusions of extensive observation, acute sagacity, and mature experience. What? Yet the errors and follies of the great genius are seldom without some radiations of understanding. So even though the great genius makes a lot of mistakes, there's some understanding, truthful understanding within their speeches and writings, by which meaner minds may be enlightened, which could help others. The incitements to pleasure are, in those authors, generally mingled with such reflections upon life. So that's such an author wants to enjoy life, but they mingle their enjoyment with those higher reflections, as well deserve to be considered distinctly from the purpose for which they were distinctly from the purpose considered, as well deserved to be considered distinctly from the purpose for which they are produced, and to be treasured up as the settled conclusions of extensive observation, acute sagacity, and mature experience. I see. So the wise person, even though they're making mistakes, will say some good stuff that might even help what he calls lesser minds. Tough term. New paragraph. It is not without true judgment that on these occasions they often warn their readers against inquiries into futurity and solicitude about events which lie hid in causes yet inactive, and which time has not brought forward into the view of reason. An idle, thoughtless resignation to chance, without any struggle against calamity or endeavor after advantage, is indeed below the dignity of a reasonable being. I like that. an idle and thoughtless resignation to chance, without any struggle against calamity or endeavor after advantage, is indeed below the dignity of a reasonable being. Interesting. In whose power Providence has put a great part even of his present happiness. But it shows that an equal ignorance of our proper sphere to harass our thoughts and with conjectures about things not yet in being. One more time. An idle and thoughtless resignation to chance, without any struggle against calamity or endeavor after advantage, is indeed below the dignity of a reasonable being, in whose power Providence has put a great part of his present happiness. But it shows an equal ignorance of our own proper sphere to harass our thoughts. But it shows an equal ignorance of our own proper sphere to harass our thoughts with conjectures about things not yet in being. How can we regulate events of which we yet know, of which we yet know not whether they will ever happen? And why should we think with painful anxiety about that on which our thoughts can have no influence? I have many useless anxieties myself. It is a maxim commonly received that a wise man is never surprised, and perhaps this exemption from astonishment may be managed. It is a maxim commonly received that a wise man is never surprised. I'd never heard that. And perhaps this exemption from astonishment may be imagined to proceed from such a prospect into futurity as gave previous intimation of those evils which often fall unexpected upon others that have less foresight. But the truth is that it is commonly received, as a maxim commonly received, that a wise man is never surprised, and perhaps this exemption from astonishment may be imagined to proceed from such a prospect into futurity as gave previous intimation of those evils which often fall unexpected upon others that have less foresight. I see. So that the wise man can see enough into the future to kind of anticipate the bad things that might happen. I think that's what he's saying there. He never considered things not yet existing as the proper objects of his attention. He never considered things not existing as the proper object of his attention. He never indulged dreams till he was deceived by their phantoms, nor ever realized non-entities to his mind. He is not surprised because he is not disappointed, and he escapes disappointment. He is not surprised because he is not disappointed, and he escapes disappointment because he never forms any expectations. That's interesting. The wise man is not surprised because he is not disappointed, and he escapes disappointment because he never forms any expectations. Interesting. The concern about things to come, that is so justly censured, is not the result of those general reflections on the variableness of fortune, the uncertainty of life, and the universal insecurity of all human acquisitions, which must always be suggested by the view of the world, but such a desponding anticipation of misfortune as fixes the mind upon scenes of gloom and melancholy. The concern about things to come that is so justly censured is not the result of those general reflections on the variableness of fortune, so not the usual, philosophic reflections about fortune, which must always be suggested by the view of the world, but such a desponding anticipation of misfortune as fixes the mind upon scenes of gloom and melancholy. So overreacting in a way, right? And makes fear predominate in every imagination. Okay. Anxiety of this kind is nearly of the same nature with jealousy and love, and suspicion in the general commerce of life. A temper which keeps a man always in alarms, disposes him to judge of everything in a manner that least favors his own quiet, fills him with perpetual stratagems of counteraction, wears him out in schemes to obviate evils which never threatened him, and at length perhaps contributes to the production of those mischiefs of which it had raised such dreadful apprehensions. Okay. Anxiety of this kind is nearly of the same nature with jealousy of love and suspicion of the general commerce of life. A temper which keeps a man always in alarms, disposes him to judge of everything in a manner that least favors his own quiet. Feels, okay, I think I get it, yeah. It has been usual in all ages for moralists to repress the swellings of vain hope by representations of the innumerable causalities to which life is subject, and by instances of the unexpected defeat of the wisest schemes of policy, and sudden subversions of the highest eminences of greatness. It has, perhaps, not been equally observed that all these examples afford the proper antidote to fear, as well as to hope, and may be applied with no less efficacy as consolations to the timorous, than as restraints to the proud. So the moralist represses the swellings of hope, of vain hope, by representations of the innumerable causalities to which life is subject, and by instances of the unexpected defeat of the wisest schemes of policy, remembering such circumstances and saying that too could be me, and sudden subversions of the highest eminences of greatness. It has perhaps not been equally observed that all these examples afford the proper antidote to fear, as well as to hope. Oh, okay, why would that be an antidote to fear? Antidote to fear. It may be applied with no less efficacy as consolations to the timorous, than as restraints to the proud. So you take all that stuff and use it as a pep talk? By thinking about the innumerable causalities to which life is subject, and by instances of the unexpected defeat of the wisest schemes of folly, and the sudden subversion of the highest eminences of greatness. How does that, reflecting on that stuff, encourage courage? I guess, you know, be strong in the face of doom. Sure doom, perhaps. Ooh, kind of stoic. Put that in the little there. I wonder if someone will ever read my little word here, stoic, on the margin in pencil. Evil is uncertain in the same degree as good, and for the reason that we ought not to hope too securely. We ought not to fear with too much dejection. The state of the world is constantly changing, and none can tell the result of the next vicissitude. Whatever is afloat in the stream of time may, when it is very near us, be driven away by an accidental blast, which shall happen to cross the general course of the current. The sudden accidents by which the powerful are depressed may fall upon those whose malice we fear, and the greatness by which we expect to be overborne may become another proof of the false flatteries of fortune. Our enemies may become weak, or we grow strong, before our encounter, or we may advance against each other without against each other without ever meeting. There are indeed natural evils which we can flatter ourselves with no hope of escaping, and with little of delay. But of the ills which are apprehended from human malignity, or the opposition of rival interests, we may always alleviate the terror by considering that our persecutors are weak and ignorant, and mortals like ourselves. The misfortunes which arise from the concurrence of unhappy incidents should never be suffered to disturb us before they happen, because if the breast had once laid open to the dread of mere possibilities of misery, life must be given a prey to dismal solicitude, and quiet must be lost forever. That's a good one. Should never be. The misfortunes which arise from the concurrence of unhappy incidents should never be suffered to disturb us before they happen, because if the breast be once laid open to the dread of mere possibilities of misery, life must be given a prey to dismal solicitude, and quiet must be lost forever. It is remarked by old Corono that it is absurd to be afraid of the natural dissolution of the body, because it must certainly happen, and can, by no caution or artifice, be avoided. Whether this sentiment be entirely just, I shall not examine, but certainly, if it be improper to fear events which must happen, it is yet more. That's a very Stoic sentiment right there. It be improper to fear events which must happen. That's a good one. Maybe that's quotable. It is yet more evidently contrary to a right reason to fear those which may never happen, and which, if they should come upon us, we cannot resist. Interesting. Johnson takes the Stoics, sees their bet, and ups the ante. Very, very Stoic sentiment right there. As we ought not to give way to fear any more than indulgence to hope. As we ought not to give way to fear any more than indulgence to hope, because the objects both of fear and hope are yet uncertain. So we ought not to trust the representations of one more than of the other, because they are both equally fallacious. As hope enlarges happiness, fear aggravates calamity. As hope enlarges happiness, fear aggravates calamity. As hope enlarges happiness, fear aggravates calamity. It is generally allowed that no man ever found the happiness of possession proportionate to that expectation which incited his desire and invigorated his pursuit. Yes. It is generally allowed that no man ever found the happiness of possession proportionate to that expectation which incited his desire. Very good right there. So possession, expectation, which incited his desire and invigorated his pursuit. That's worth quoting right there for sure. Nor has any man found the evils of life so formidable in reality as they were described by him to him by his own imagination. Wow, it just goes on and on. Every species of distress brings with it some peculiar supports, some unforeseen means of resisting. Every species of distress brings with it some peculiar supports, some unforeseen means of resisting, or power of enduring. Taylor justly blames some pious persons who indulge their fancies too much, set themselves by the Taylor justly blames some pious persons who indulge their fancies too much, set themselves by the force of imagination in the place of the ancient martyrs and confessors, and question the validity of their own faiths, because they shrink at the thought of flames and tortures. It is, says he, sufficient that you are able to encounter the temptations which now assault you. It is, says he, sufficient that you are able to encounter the temptations which now assault you. When God sends trials, he may send strength. Even though I don't believe in God, that's a good one. When God sends trials, he may send strength. All fear is in itself painful, and when it conduces not to safety, is painful without use. There's another good one. Jeez, Dr. Johnson. I could spend the whole day on this one chapter. Every consideration, therefore, by which groundless terrors may be removed, adds something to human happiness. Every consideration, therefore, by which groundless terrors may be removed, adds something to human happiness. It is likewise not unworthy of remark that in proportion as our cares are employed upon the future, they are abstracted from the present, from the only time which we can call our own, and of which, if we neglect with the apparent duties to make provision against visionary attacks, it is likewise not unworthy of remark that in proportion as our cares are employed upon the future, they are abstracted from the present, from the only time which we can call our own, and of which, if we neglect the apparent duties to make provision against visionary attacks, we shall certainly counteract our own purpose. For he, doubtless, mistakes his true interest who thinks that he can increase his safety when he impairs his virtue. That's the end. Let me read that last bit. It is likewise not unworthy of remark that in proportion as our cares are employed upon the future, they are abstracted from the present. So when we think about the future, we're taking away from the present, from the only time in which we can call our own, which is now, and of which, if we neglect the apparent duties to make provision against visionary attacks, we shall certainly counteract our own purpose, so we don't protect ourselves from the attacks that come in the mind. For he, doubtless, mistakes his true interest who thinks that he can increase his safety when he impairs his virtue. He mistakes his true interest who thinks he can increase his safety when he impairs his virtue. There's a line right there too. Wow. Wow, this is very rich and dense with weighty thoughts, this particular one. Very good. A long read though, huh? But well worth the time, well worth the effort.